Delighted I can introduce John Roe. So we have a little bit of a break from our morning period. John will be known to many of you. He was a speaker at our Venice conference in 2014, and thanks to John, we managed to get into the Palazzo Labia to see the Tiepolo frescoes. And I think John's command of Italian helped with our two delightful Italian assistants in Venice. And John was also our host in York when we had our conference there. John is a trustee of the AP Society, and for many years was professor of Renaissance literature at the University of York and visiting professor at various other institutions, including in the US. So I'm delighted to thank John for giving us this talk on Pamela Flitton and the Elusive Pole. So over to you, John, and Keith will be helping with the slides.
Yeah, hopefully everybody has got the slides.
Yes, on my screen, Keith.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Paul, and also thank you everybody for coming to this talk. And I know it is a very strange and extraordinary time that we are living through. So I hope that this will be a little break, as Paul said. I'm talking about Pamela Flitton and the Elusive Pole. The pole is called Szymański. I have it on authority from a Polish speaker, that is how you say the name, Szymański. Well, Szymański there is no first name, only Szymański. He's a fascinating figure who appears or gives the impression of appearing at the end of the soldier's art. Sightings that continue throughout military philosophers, where he finally disappears again one final time. The narrator casts a last thought after him during the victory Thanksgiving service in St. Paul's. Who is Szymański when Timothy? The name suggests he is a Pole, but it proves to be one of several aliases. Of course, Pole likes aliases. Think of Braddock, alias Thorn. Names Kubicka, Broad, Greza, and Dupont. And that connects him with the Free French. Refers to the Polish forces from the Free French. And there is a time that he spends in a military prison. He is of no fixed origin or identity. One thing that is certain about him is that he is a reckless swashbuckler type, no doubt full of charm and energy, especially energy, who is able to survive and prosper in circumstances that should put paid to him, but don't. All of this is surmise because we never meet him. That is, Jenkins never meets him, but hears a good deal about him. In particular, his ability to exasperate anyone he comes into contact with. He obviously breaks the law, yet he is no ordinary criminal. On the contrary, he acquires a sort of mythical status as the narrative proceeds. Our first introduction to him is in the French language, as the subject of a conversation between an English and French captain. And this is the first slide, I think, if you'd like to put that up for me. Thank you, Keith. Et maintenant, une dernière chose, mon capitaine, said the Frenchman. Maintenant que nous avons terminé avec l'affaire Szymański, nous avons terminé. Okay. And that is all that Jenkins or we hear. Then a little later in the volume, slightly more information, this time in English, and it's given by David Penniston. That's the next slide. Well then, no, I think we've, sorry, no, that's my fault. There is no slides, so you can go back, Keith. I'm just quoting without a slide. I didn't want to give too many slides, you see. Well then, this is Penniston. On the 1st of next month, Szymański ceases to serve under the Free French Authority and comes under the command of the Polish forces in Great Britain. That's settled at last. Well, ironic words, as we shall see, because the Szymański affair with its problems, only grows and grows in complexity and awkwardness. These two references seem to be to whet the appetite, as no further reference is made in the soldier's art, but he does appear again in the military philosophers, but still only by name and report. So Szymański's activities are confined to the two latter war novels, and after that there's no further mention. The Military Philosophers is a war novel, but a good deal of it turns on military bureaucracy, the petty egoistical infighting that involves familiar characters such as Winmapool, Sonny Fairbrother, as well as among some of the foreign attaches, with names which recall Lundqvist and Urn, if you remember them, who conduct their own memorable duel on and off the tennis court at La Grenadière, which is all the way back in a question of upbringing. So Szymański returns, appearing without truly appearing in the Military Philosophers. Jenkins hears tantalizing tidbits about his behavior, but he never meets him face to face. So neither do we. In various ways, he rubs up against other characters known to Jenkins. He becomes the focus of a duel, yet another duel, between Winmapool and Sonny Fairbrother. This is about the question of his being sprung from military prison by Fairbrother, aided by Odo Stevens, much to Winmapool's annoyance. We don't know why he's gone to prison in the first place, but it adds to his growing myth. Peter Templer, Odo Stevens, Bob Duport, Pamela Flitton all mention him as if they have direct acquaintance, certainly more direct than Nick himself. This failure of the narrator to meet such a beguiling character head on is almost unique in dance. But is it a failure artistically? We think we know Szymański better than we do, and may even in recollection believe that the character has indeed appeared before us in person. It is curious that in a novel which introduces so many new and foreign military personnel, the most fascinating of them is someone we never see, but perhaps are led to believe that we may have seen. Now we might pause here, and I'll make a meta-poetical point, if you'll pardon the word. The device Powell is practicing was deployed by writers like Shakespeare. It involves the way the imagination works as a reader or receiver of a literary or artistic work. In his long narrative poem, The Rape of Lucrece, Shakespeare has his heroine wander in distress, following her violation by the king's son, Tarquin, about her house, looking for some way to relieve her feelings. She comes across a painting of the fall of Troy, one detail of which shows the ranks of the Greeks, the Greek army lined up before the city. And we've got on the screen the key stanza. For much imaginary work was there. Conceit deceitful, of course, conceit, conception. Conceit deceitful, so compact, so kind, i.e. natural, that for Achilles' image stood his spear, gripped in an armored hand. Himself behind was left unseen, save to the eye of mind. A hand, foot, face, leg, a head stood for the whole to be imagined. A kind of synecdoche, but it's applied in narrative terms. And the key phrase is the eye of mind, which I italicized. This speaks well to the case of Szymański, left unseen, save to the eye of mind. The poet suggests that the painter invites us to fill in the details for ourselves, which we do readily and easily. We are active in the creation in that sense. Achilles is a military hero with epic dimensions. In Szymański, Powell creates another military figure, of a different kind, perhaps, but who also enjoys a sort of heroical status, even if for criminality rather than virtue or nobility. Powell gives us this overall picture, which includes an assessment of Szymański. Szymański, the narrator says, was one of those professional scourges of authority. Sorry, don't go there yet. This is another of my non-visuals, that appears sporadically in all armies, a type to which the Allied contingents were peculiarly subject, owing to the nature of their composition and recruitment. Jenkins compares Szymański with Sayce, a rather miserable, petty criminal type who had been the bane of the regiment, and especially Captain Gortkin in Northern Ireland in the Valley of Bones. And there we can have the quote, thank you. Like Sayce of my former battalion, Szymański was always making trouble, but Sayce magnified to a phantasmagoric degree, a kind of super Sayce of infinitely greater intelligence and disruptive potential. If you are to be a rogue, you had better be one on the epic Szymański scale. Well, that's all right, because such characters have, according to ancient terms, magnanimity or greatness of soul. You don't have to be specially moral to have this kind of magnanimity. You become great either by virtuous or by wicked or indifferently ferocious deeds, as in the case of, say, Genghis Khan or Achilles himself, who is noted for his savagery in the Iliad. Shakespeare also gives the example of Coriolanus, who is described admiringly as a thing of blood. This brings up a point about the classicist in Powell. Powell enjoys treating the world we live in, with all its quotidian ordinariness, as nonetheless holding classical dimensions. Characters are from ordinary life, but they're also from mythology. However, in a work of naturalism, which is the form of novel Powell is working in, this can only be so to a limited extent. Take the case of Dickie Umfraville, who first appears in the acceptance world. Umfraville is the lover to beat all lovers. Among his conquests is Anne Stepney, whom he takes away from Barnby, himself a lover of no mean accomplishment. Umfraville appears to the narrator to display a curious form of madness, which gives him a strange, slightly unreal aura. And if I can have the slide. Not the kind of madness that was raving, or even in the ordinary sense dangerous, but a warning that no proper mechanism existed for operating normal controls. So beautifully put, and it's such an arresting sentence. Now, several characters in Dance are out of the ordinary and allow the novelist to pursue a somewhat mythological line through them. The premise being that the Furies operate in human affairs in ways that would have made sense to the ancient world. Umfraville is one of these, but like most of the others in the sequence, his epic stature is reduced by his having to function in a world of ordinary human dimensions, where people speak in a familiar day-to-day prose and not in classical hexameters. A rare exception is the account of the last moments of Extratnal given by Malcolm Crowding near the beginning of Temporary Kings. This gains mythical proportions in the telling. It is hard in the naturalistic novel to achieve epic status for a character who is subject to the norms of social intercourse. As Congreve puts it, in the Iliad, nobody just sits down and has a chat, least of all over a cup of coffee. Balzac's Vautrin the arch criminal in Le Père Goriot, who goes under various aliases in other novels such as Les Illusions Perdues, comes very close to such a status. But there's also the risk of melodrama in such a creation. However, coming back to Szymański is not called upon to speak in an ordinary fashion, as he never speaks at all. He's never seen else. His crimes are never specified. What is he in the military jug for? How is he a scourge of military authority? Why is a question put in Parliament about Szymański? Never presenting the man in person, leaving the details of his escapades obscure, helps convey the feeling that he is an otherworldly persona, beyond and above the activities of everybody else. The novelist leaves it to the eye of mind of the reader. We are encouraged to imagine Szymański for ourselves. Szymański, though, is not merely a symbol of activity on the heroic scale. He also takes part in the action of the plot in a decisive manner. He is assigned to a mission for which he will be dropped somewhere, unspecified. Sonny Fairbrother explains that Szymański has the qualities needed for the job. Nick supposes this to be perhaps the assassination of a Gestapo chief. His criminal ruthlessness makes him useful in spheres that Allied command smiles upon rather than frowns. This task is what connects him with Peter Templar. Both are given secret missions. However, Templar perishes, according to Pamela Flitton, as a result of Winterpool's machinations. And this comes out later in the Military Philosophers, where she accuses Winterpool publicly. Pamela herself, interestingly, is sent to Cairo, but not just for a bit of dalliance. She tells Jenkins, who says to her, escaped from the ATS, and she says, got invalided. A lady of leisure. My job's a secret one. Laconic responses that are most enigmatic. It is time now to bring in Pamela Flitton more fully. She arrives on the scene partway through the Military Philosophers. I refer to her as Flitton rather than Winterpool, as she only becomes Pamela Winterpool on the last page of the novel. Jenkins learns that she is Stringham's niece. It is she who tells him that Stringham had been present at the fall of Singapore. Pamela Flitton and Szymański have a number of traits in common. They behave as their own inclinations take them. They are no respecters of law, morality, custom, or authority, or in the case of Pamela Flitton, ordinary, decent behavior. Szymański's disregard for legality topples over into outright crime, while if not criminal, some of Pamela's actions come dangerously close. Perhaps her most outrageous offense is the destruction of the manuscript of ex-Trapnell's novel, Profiles in Spring, in the Maida Vale Canal. One senses, although the evidence for this is never present or presented, that Szymański is a charming, physically attractive character which would help him get away with deviant behavior. They are each of them phantasmagoric, to use Nick's word for Szymański. Pamela is not charming, but she is powerfully attractive, which enables her to practice destruction on a major scale. Destruction of what? Well, let Jenkins tell us. Giving men hell is what Miss Flitton likes. That's Dickie Umperville's verdict. Jenkins illustrates how this predilection expresses itself. First, her indifference to the age and status of the men she decided to fascinate. Second, the unvarying technique of silence followed by violence, with which she persecuted her lovers. She seemed to prefer older men, possibly because of their potential for deeper suffering. Young men might superficially transcend their seniors in this respect, while once pinioned, the middle-aged could be made to writhe almost indefinitely. It's on a colossal scale. She seems, if you peruse these pages, to have taken on the whole of the British Army and served in several of the foreign detachments as well. As with Szymański, there is something legendary or gargantuan about her exploits. Jenkins' first impression of her is that she is perhaps not altogether normal, what Borrett called a bit off the beam, which recalls, of course, his account of Dickie Umperville. And he adds, and we have the quote for this, many men would find this cosmic rage. I think, can you put that up, Keith? Sorry. Thank you very much. Many men would find this cosmic rage, and I've italicized cosmic rage, this cosmic rage with life an added attraction. The impression was of an uneasy personality, one to cause a lot of trouble. Clearly, Pamela and Szymański have a lot in common. They seem to run in parallel on a twin axis, the one complementing the other. In structural and particularly narrative terms, this gives the novel a clarity of definition, as well as a specific impetus. A great deal of material, especially the large number of foreign characters and the establishments they represent, threatens to reduce the plot to incoherence if not handled carefully. Powell is a master of keeping many balls in the air, but The Military Philosophers presents a special challenge. The symmetry of the trajectories of these two characters, Pamela and Szymański, gives the construction a welcome tightness. In their individual yet complementary ways, they also inject an energy at critical points. While the novelist can be relied on to produce color from the least promising, in the case of The Military Philosophers, bureaucratic material, we are well aware that the main business of the war is conducted at a remove, and that what is going on in London is a waiting game. There is a danger of tedium. Pamela and Szymański make sure that this does not happen. Now, so bringing them together here, Szymański foreshadows Pamela and paves the way for her entrance. This might explain, or it might be one reason why he remains primarily that, a shadow himself. Pamela is the main event. All the color and substance belong to her. Stylistically, though his behavior aids and abets the development and presentation of her as a character, since they are both wild and uncontrollable, it is important that he should not steal her limelight. A Szymański who came forward in his own person might take some disposing of. The construction is very carefully and fascinatingly thought out. If she were to appear on the scene without any Szymański, she might look like a frivolous or superficial erotic sideshow. But the erotic is anything but superficial in Poe. In that very male, militarized world that is the novel's context, Szymański introduces anarchy and defiance and indifference to order. This helps make Pamela's similar behavior more natural and less out of place, without in any way diminishing its power to shock and excite the imagination. The two of them belong together, if only in terms of structure of the plot. As for the erotic, that is marked principally by suffering and a sense of destructiveness. In the novels, minor figures provide examples. Bilson the maid in The Kindly Ones, Betty, Templar's second wife, McClintock, not a minor character, but an interesting one, McClintock, the music critic. He curses his wife, but kills himself when the marriage ends. Aphrodite is at the heart of the ruin of Troy, and Powell draws on this classical example. Pamela Flitton embodies Aphrodite's destructive power. An element that Szymański and Pamela have in common, and which amuses me, is that each of them is spoken of at one point or another in French. You remember the first mention of Szymański by the French officer, who refers to l'affaire Szymański. Maintenant que nous avons terminé avec l'affaire Szymański. French is also the language used of Pamela by the soothsayer, Mrs. Eardley, when she reads her palm. What she finds there is so dire, so unseemly, that it can only be expressed in a language other than English. You must be careful, my dear. There are things here that surprise even me. Les tentations lubriques sont bien prononcées. La débauche, l'effronterie, la licence, le dévergondage, la coquetterie, la vanité, l'esprit léger, l'inconstance, la paresse. So do Szymański and Pamela meet? Are they lovers? She seems to have affairs with everybody. Why not with him? Curiously, though, Pamela Flitton asks our narrator on more than one occasion if he has met a Pole called Szymański. Now, this is unusual for her because she rarely expresses any interest in individual men, except when she uses one to berate her husband. Men show interest in her, and that is all she requires. However, one incident occurs which makes Jenkins feel that he may have at last caught sight of the elusive pole. That is on the steps of the old Ufford, now a Polish military establishment. And I could have the quote, if I may have the quote. As I went down the steps, I saw a uniformed Pole had strolled out of the Ufford, as I now thought of the place, and was chatting with Pamela Flitton. He seemed to be making a better job of it than myself, because although continuing to look sullen, she was listening with comparative acceptance to what seemed the commonplaces of conversation. At first, I thought the Pole was an officer, then saw he was an other rank, who wore his battle dress, as most of them did, with a tough air and some swagger. He was dark, almost oriental in feature, showing a lot of gold teeth when he smiled and saluted before withdrawing up the steps. The elusive Pole, indeed, and of course, I am punning here, as I'm sure you have guessed. The author Powell is also elusive in the cunning way he conceals his artistry. If it is Szymański, this is Jenkins' only sighting of him. His name comes up in a conversation between Nick and Pamela a little while later. She says, when you were with the Poles, did you ever hear the name Szymański? He replies, it's a very common Polish name, but if you mean the man who used to be with the Free French and caused endless trouble, and then transferred to the Poles and caused endless trouble there, I know quite a lot about him. She laughed. I just wondered, she said. What about him? Oh, nothing. Was he the character you were talking to outside that Polish hideout in Bayswater? She shook her head, laughing softly again. This is all very enigmatic. Nothing is said further about to suggest an affair between the two of them. What immediately comes up just after this conversation is Pamela's love affair with the doomed Peter Templar, as retailed by Ted Jevons. Like Pamela, like Szymański, Templar is bound on a mission where the arcane flickering signals about Szymański continue to come from Pamela to Jenkins. She seems to want to keep reminding him of him. And why? The Belgian attaché Claudette mentions her to Nick. By the way, I met a young lady last night who told me she knew you. Who was that? Mademoiselle Flitton. How was she? Claudette laughed, evidently aware of the impression the name would make. She told me to remind you of the pole she mentioned when you last met. She did. That was some joke. Some people thought so. I hope Mademoiselle Flitton is in good Belgian hands now. I think she has higher aspirations than that. Prince Theodoric is the name that occurs in our imagination, and we are getting into the whole of the Balkan follow-on after the war and the prince's uncertain and increasingly unstable role. But he does not develop that too much around Pamela. Nonetheless, one has the feeling that Pamela is playing a cat and mouse game with the narrator, dropping hints of a sort, making it clear to him and to the reader that she is involved in something more than her usual trampling on a lover's feelings. And in plot terms, this again brings her close to Szymański, whom Fairbrother commends for his outstanding qualities, which are going to be put to use in a Balkans episode. The plot finally brings them together, not as lovers, but as agents in undercover operations. The final twist, the final parallel. She is going to make use of her qualities. On her return from Cairo, Jenkins asks her how she got back. I traveled on a general's luggage. Enough said. Jenkins muses one final time on Szymański during the Victory Thanksgiving service in St. Paul's, and he wonders what had become of him, and imagines that his origins might in the end be Macedonian, a final clue perhaps to the identity of the pole on the steps of the upper, dark, almost oriental in feature. That would clinch it perhaps. Almost certainly it was Szymański with whom Pamela Flitton was in conversation, but not conversation of a kind Jenkins was tempted to imagine or suppose. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Let me just get rid of the screen share. Okay. Right. Questions for John? Comments, if any?
John?
Okay, Jill. Jill Bennett has got her hand up. You're on mute, Jill.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that talk, which was fascinating. I have to say, I find the military philosophers is the one I like best of the whole thing. Mm. And now you may know all about this, in which case cut me off, but I don't know if you know that there was a very famous wartime female spy called Halina Szymańska, a Pole. And it's quite possible that Anthony Powell knew something about her, not knew her, but knew of her. And it's just conceivable that the name had some resonance, because she was described as in a Secret Intelligence Service report as a most attractive and formidable personality. She was paid by the British, operating in Switzerland and doing a lot of very dangerous and difficult work, which also involved her seducing a number of people, but that was in Switzerland, not in wartime London. But it's not impossible that Powell had heard something about.
I've lost you again, Jill.
Oh,
No, I can hear Jill.
I can hear Jill fine.
you can hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
My screen is freezing. I don't know
Right.
what's going on.
Keep going, Jill. We can hear you.
So I just thought as you were talking,
Jill, I
brought
can't hear you. I don't know whether anybody else
Yes,
can.
yes. I can hear John. You
Okay,
can
it's
hear her?
me.
I can hear Jill.
You
Yeah,
can hear
okay.
me.
Okay.
Well, I finished really. I just wanted to interject that little. I mean, this is my line of country, not yours, but because I think it would not be untypical of Powell to make use of that kind of information that he would have picked up in the course of his military liaison, because he did have dealings with the Polish intelligence in London, and they would have been getting a lot of reports from Halina Szymanska. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I think that. Thank you so much. I think that's fascinating, and I didn't know. But of course, Szymanska is as you know, the female version of Szymanski.
Yes. And it may be, it's a very common name, you were quite right. But the description of her, of Halina Szymanska as a most attractive and formidable personality reminded me a bit of Pamela. That was all.
I think that sounds absolutely prescriptive. And thank you. I'm sure he did know and he worked it in. So thank you very much.
John, it's Paul here.
Paul.
Yeah, in Hilary Spurling's handbook to dance, under the entry for Szymanski, she says alias Kubica, Brod, Groza, Dupont, etc. Can you remind me where all these aliases and the etc. come from?
I don't remember. I couldn't now, but I think he does give in the novel. When he introduces Szymanski, I think he does give these, but I think they're only possibly he also uses etc. But there are 4 that I can remember. Dupont made me think, well, of course, he might have been using that alias to be with the Free French until they got heartily sick of him and they passed him on to the Poles.
Okay, so it's just a broader indication of his abilities as basically on the Secret Service side. He's running with all these different aliases.
Yes, he only, according to Powell, of course, he only enters the Secret Service later. Well, doesn't know what he's doing, except, I mean, it's obviously a gargantuan kind of performance, but of course not specified in any detail. I see Nick Burns got his hand up.
Yeah, Nick.
Thank you very much for that, John. And I never thought of Szymanski as an offstage character, although I now realize he never actually appears. But it reminded me, of course, there's an offstage place in dance, which is Dogdean. And we never visit Dogdean, although it's talked about all the time. And I've always assumed that what Pole is doing there is kind of nudging Evelyn Waugh, who made such a fuss about Brideshead and by having an absent country house. And I wonder, I don't know the original, but I wonder if following that, there is another World War II spy character, maybe somebody in a Graham Greene book or so on, that by having Szymanski, having him be an implicit character, having him be a character known only by reportage, that AP is playing off. So, after hearing your talk, I'm going to kind of look for that.
Yes, thank you. I don't know either, but yes, there could be. There could well be. Thank you, Nick.
Anybody else? Any other questions or comments for John?
Yes, we've got a couple
Nobody?
here. You've got two, Keith.
I have now. Yes, sorry. I'm looking elsewhere. Doris, you first.
First, condolences to all my British friends on the death of the Queen. I know this is a very sad time. I'd like you to comment a little bit on Pamela's death, because although she was so promiscuous, it doesn't seem that she took any pleasure. One of the characters that I don't recall word for word, that her pleasure was in destruction, and the fact that she did die in bed. If you could just maybe cast a little bit of light on that.
I find it hard too. I mean, that's a very tricky and difficult question, of course, because first of all, it brings up the motivation of Pamela Flitton. And it is that's again an imponderable. People give different views of her. Ex-Trapnell comes closest to saying what she was like sexually, and
Right.
one would assume that is something one should rely on, and that other people are perhaps a bit evasive, and so forth. It looks as if she is determined to die, and Mrs. Erdley tells her that she is in great danger. She rather guesses without spelling it out that she's bent on a death wish. She wants to inflict as much damage as possible before she goes. And her main target, of course, is Pool. And it's always struck me as very odd that she appears to Jenkins just at the moment when Stringham has disappeared. That is the death. She announces his death in Singapore. And she's then on the scene. And I think Mrs. Erdley might even say the spirit, the avenging spirit of Stringham has passed into his niece or something like that. Of course, it's never said, but it's the sort of thing she might say rather than the other things. But it is very curious. But she's set on destroying Pool as much as she can. Doesn't absolutely do it because he's reserved. His fate's reserved for the end. But then, of course, with Gwyneth, she's determined to actually die for love. But I must say, it's curious. And Powell, he does go very quiet at crucial moments. He's good at dramatizing everything that has gone into it, but he doesn't try to give an answer. And I think that's right, personally. But of course, it does leave you speculating and guessing. And I've been speculating and guessing in this talk.
Yeah. Okay. Steve Loveman.
I haven't read the passages about Pamela Flitton and the Pole recently, John, but I always rather felt that she had a sexual relationship with the guy, and she referred to him as part of the kind of creation of the myth that she knew that he was a strange, elusive character, and that Nick had probably heard about him, and she was kind of creating a little bit of a myth for herself, and also trying to and also Paul is building up for the reader the idea that this guy is in the background and she knows about him and may well have a relationship with him. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, thank you. It is enigmatic. I mean, what I tried to say in the talk is the thing that does strike me as odd is that she actually raises the question of him to the narrator, that to say Jenkins is very much a narrator in this bit. He's not really a character interacting so much as somebody receiving information. And I feel it is a plot device, and she's trying to nudge him and us towards what I think is the parallel course that she and Szymański are on, rather than an intimate relationship. It's very strange that she should send these messages or say to him, "Did you ever meet Szymański?" I mean, why would she say that? It's out of character. People ask her about people, and then of course she either says nothing or tells them to mind their own business or whatever. I do find it odd. It's almost as if she's trying to say and this is the device that Powell is using, look upon Szymański and me in the same light. We're up to the same game. It doesn't mean we are lovers, although of course it doesn't rule it out. So as I said, that's what I was exploring. Excuse me. We have a question.
Yeah.
Your name. The name's on screen.
Alf next.
Yes.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
No, he's okay now.
Yes. Yes, when Nicholas mentioned Dogdean and a certain parallel with Brideshead, it occurred to me that there's another parallel with Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honor, in that Lute is rather a mysterious character in the same way as Szymański is, although we actually meet Lute at certain points, but it's always rather fleeting and nobody seems to know what he's doing.
Yes. Yes, I think, well, there are so many, you're absolutely right. The two authors sort of seem to refer to each other, and they sometimes create figures who do resemble each other. And I think that is a very good point. But as you say, we don't meet Szymański, and that is the interesting. It's built up.
Yes.
I mean, if you compare him with Sayce, for example, who's a petty criminal. So it's just curious. I mean, that's what got me going on this, really. Why he should build up a figure we don't meet. So, but thank you. I think there are definite parallels between one and another.
John, do you see any parallels between Szymański and Waring in what's become of Waring?
I think there is there's something going on there. I Poe liked to do people who would perform disappearing acts, or who would, as he does, in Waring, and then creates a personality which is not real. Or, I mean, Szymański is a real personality insofar as we assume he does. Jenkins is pursuing his career in some way, but of course, in the telling, in the narration, or the creation of him, he's absolutely unreal. But that he is serving those other purposes, which I try to elaborate about setting the stage in a way for the woman who is going to be center stage. Yes, I think Waring is. I mentioned Braddock alias Thorne. Poe really likes the idea of the creation of something.
Yeah. Okay, John Blackster.
Sort of going back to the character of Szymański,
Yes.
It's funny how different people perceive things differently. I certainly hadn't put him as being like his namesake, who was actually liaising between the German anti-fascist contingent in a very high level and very dangerous operation of spying in that way. I put him down as being, when they say he's going to do some useful job, I had in my mind that he was basically probably spoke many languages, was extremely good at shinning up drain pipes and assassinating people with his bare hands and so on and so forth. And that therefore possibly the difficulties were much more likely to be with I don't know, sort of black market goods or that sort of thing, perhaps a bit of blackmail, but criminal activities rather than spying ones. But then when it actually came to the his use, to special forces, then that was his I don't know, his sort of toughness, his a sort of tough egg type characteristics like Odo Stevens were what they wanted. But
yes.
I didn't see him as being a sort of totally sophisticated character.
No, but of course, yes, you're right. But then it's how, as you say, it's how we see him. And again, the reason why I took the Shakespeare example is that it shows you how much imagination we have, in that we are given a few gobbets and a few details, and we are capable of fashioning it out for ourselves in a quite sophisticated way. I mean, you have your version of it there, John, and I think that that's partly what Powell is doing. Is that I'm going to leave this one to the reader, because I can be pretty sure that the reader is going to build this figure up with these hints that I'm giving. And of course, that's why I say it's a very accomplished kind of bit of prestidigitation, if you like, on the part of the Powell the conjurer, and delighting in his art, actually, just as Shakespeare pauses to delight in the art of the poet in that stanza that I quoted. Powell's kind of enjoying a moment in which he's just playing with his own creativity, and that actually does come back to Keith's point, I think, about Waring, and the figure who then plays the game. And then Powell's quite fascinated with that, but he shows that any novelist is going to do it. And Szymanski is the moment where he sort of comes out in the open and does it. It shows that he's doing it.
But when you also talked about Pamela perhaps being the sort of nemesis coming back from Stringer, but also, of course, was Templar as well. But again, she's not most reliable. I mean, I think, I haven't got a book or anything, but I think she says of Templar, the nicest man I ever knew. Well, yes. when she, one time was behaving so, it doesn't seem as if this seems to be reinterpreting or even rewriting history as she would like it to be, or how it suits her actions at that particular time.
I think that's absolutely right. But of course, as a character, she's not alone in that, is she? I mean, in the rewriting of history, if you like, the reinterpreting it, and to some degree, it may be self-delusion. It might just be a way of, in her case, another way of going on the attack, because of course she says this to her husband.
Yes,
must be very painful.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but I think don't we all rewrite history to some extent? I mean, there is a sort of academic, scientific, psychological theory that says, within the brain, whenever you recall something and retell the story, if you like, it gets re-recorded so that next time what you're remembering is not the original, but your re-recorded version. So, stories are going to drift over time.
Yes.
It's Chinese whispers within your own brain.
Yes.
Doesn't Powell at one point explicitly say that Pamela is always praising her dead lovers?
That's a good question.
I think he does somewhere say that.
She may. I can't remember that.
Perhaps at the point where somebody mentioned where John Blackster mentioned them after Miss Eardley or something like, or the Templar thing, I think, when the nicest man I ever knew. I think he may explicitly say that she's always praising her dead lovers. And as you say, it could be a taunt for her present ones.
Yes, she may well. I mean, of course, you have to have a pretty compendious memory to pick up the detail. But so you may well be right on that.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, I have to sign off, Keith and John. I just wanted to say, I was certain I had basically seen Szymanski in the books, as he was the chap who came down the steps and chatted to Pamela Flitton. Yes. I was convinced I could sort of see the man, and I knew who he was. So it was a kind of revelation to me, John, when you said, no, we never actually know exactly who he is, or he never appears. Which I think plays to your point about how the imagination fills the gap, which is the skill of the author. I have to sort of sign off, but I'll hand over to Keith. I just wanted to say that I am busy working on the talks for October, November and December. So keep an eye on the website for those. And no doubt Keith will send out invitations when we schedule them.
When we've got the schedule, I'll send out a circular to everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, John. Cheers.
Thank you, Paul.